The Florida Panthers defeat the Montreal Canadiens once again, sweep the season series, and have a chance to salvage this 4-game road trip.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, March 31st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. Yes, we do have an Instagram account now for the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel. And send in your screenshot of your subscription and send it over to me and DM it at LO_FLA Panthers or email it at lockedonflapanthers@gmail.com for your chance to win 2 free tickets to the Florida Panthers versus Toronto Maple Leafs game on April 10th. Best of luck, everybody. So my goodness, the Florida Panthers, I was a little nervous coming into this game because, you get a big win come from behind victory against the Toronto Maple Leafs. But at the same time, I think about it, and it's a team that the Florida Panthers have owned this season. Every single game that the Panthers have faced off against the Habs, it's been won by multiple goals, and the average goals per game for the Panthers in this one is 6.75 after tonight's 5-2 win over the Habs. And it's Friday, which means it's a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Nick Fairbanks is here. Let me get the right background for you, by the way. Nick, welcome to the show. A victorious Fairbanks Friday for us to recap this game and talk about a sweep of the Habs and just the Panthers continuing to fight.
The resiliency of this team is unmatched. To say that they held a playoff spot for about 5 minutes tonight after the win, they're still in it. I mean, I know that we've had multiple, season-ending ceremonies so far, but they just don't want to go away. They don't want to stop. I do want to say welcome to the Gram, by the way, for the Locked On podcast. Hope you'll have a little bit of fun with that. And, just great to be back here on Fairbanks Friday.
Yeah, man. And I'm excited to explore more of the content and dish out more of the content on the Gram. But let's go into this game. I would say if this isn't a 60-minute game, I would say maybe like a 55 to 57 minute game that the Florida Panthers played for the most part. The Panthers were just dominating the Montreal Canadiens. Yeah, they gave up the first goal 1 minute and 23 seconds into the game, which was a fluky goal that Alex Lyon gave up from Sean Farrell, just his second game in the NHL from Harvard, and then a sharp angle shot. Alex Lyon lets that squeak in, maybe deflected off either Montour or Stahl, and then late to hug his post. But after that, 3 minutes later, Lundell scores after picking up a rebound off Matthew Tkachuk's shot. And let's talk about that goal. And Tkachuk gets it from the top of the circle and shoots it gets it towards the net. And what's the difference in that play, Nick? The difference is the Habs standing around while the shot was going off for Tkachuk. Lundell is already getting a head start, getting towards the slot and punching that in for the first goal of the game.
Definitely. And, that's something that I think Florida needs to do more of. They got a playoff goal last night with Reinhart tipping Ekblad's shot to tie the game up, and, they ultimately won. But, a lot of these goals that the Panthers need to score if they're going to, proceed on to the playoffs and also win rounds, they have to score dirty goals. And, I'm just glad that Anton Lundell has kind of found his game. He looked a lot better tonight as well. And, I hope the team understands that, as long as you're throwing the puck to the net and the puck is getting to the net, that anything can happen. And, you got to beat your man out. So, as you're saying, you got to play 60 minutes. You got to play 60 minutes, both ends of the ice and everything. And I felt like Florida did that tonight.
Yeah, for the most part, it was there. They were great on exiting the zone, not allowing the Montreal Canadiens to get too much time off offensive zone time, and just the line of Tkachuk, Luostarinen, and Lundell just bringing a different element. Of course, you have the defense of Eetu Luostarinen. Of course, he's been up and down in the lineup, but still solidifying a big role for this team. And then try to between the legs even for Eetu after a rebound. And there was a time where Lundell only had 3 shots on goal, 2 more than the next person. And also, I want to give a lot of credit to Ryan Lomberg tonight, even though he didn't get on the score sheet for the Panthers. I mean, he was consistently back in their offensive zone, forechecking. He created the power play opportunity as Pizzetta interfered Lomberg, and then the Panthers score on that very next power play. Excuse me, it was the Lomberg hooked on Barron. Excuse me, he did draw a penalty before, but the Matthew Tkachuk's first goal of the game, but just Lomberg creating that opportunity. And that was I believe he had in the Toronto game, he had a shot block, and it was deflected way past the neutral zone into the Panther zone, and he's the first one to win the race to get the puck, and this time it draws a penalty. Just what a game by the Lamborghini.
He brings it every single game, and I'll be honest, I think he may be the only Florida Panther that actually does bring it 100% of the time, every shift, every game. He is the spark plug. I happen to think that he might be the actual heart of the team. Just with his energy, he doesn't care who he gets mixed up with. It seems like he'll go to battle against anybody, which is refreshing to see. And he'll get in the dirty areas, as you were saying, he was forechecking. He beat, the Montreal defenseman to the puck and drew a penalty, which ultimately finally put the Panthers up and put them up for good. So just little things like that, from just putting in effort can go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he even got an and even when he was hooked there, he had a backhand pass to get it to Sam Reinhart to try a shot opportunity there. And the Panthers, they also score a few minutes later. Tkachuk gets his second of the game on the give and go with a whole bunch of open space, and then just nailing the wrister there. And Tkachuk against the Habs this season. Well, now 13 points in 4 games versus Montreal, and also surpassing the 100-point mark for Matthew Tkachuk. 4th player with back-to-back seasons with 100 points when changing teams, and now set a franchise record for 32 multi-point games in a Florida Panthers sweater. And this is year 1 of this trade, Nick. Just I know the overall results as far as record aren't where they want to be, and I guess we'll talk more about that in segment 2, but let's talk about what Tkachuk has done not only against the Canadiens, but just this season now, getting to the 100-point mark. Just incredible what Matthew Tkachuk brings every game.
There was a lot of questions coming in after that trade. I know a lot of Florida fans were, very happy to get Matthew Tkachuk, but, we had to give up a lot at the same time. We had to give up Mackenzie Weegar. We had to give up Jonathan Huberdeau. We gave up a first-round draft pick. It was a lot to give up. And now you're seeing why Florida and Bill Zito gave up what they did. Mackenzie Weegar and Jonathan Huberdeau right now are not even sniffing anything close to what Matthew Tkachuk is doing for the Florida Panthers. He is literally trying to lead them to the playoffs, put the team on his back, and make sure that it happens. And, that's what leaders do. And, if there's anybody outside of McDavid right now that deserves hard consideration, it has to be Matthew Tkachuk.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. And just his second hat trick now. That's also worth mentioning. His second hat trick with the Florida Panthers. The first one, I happened to be in person for that one. It was against the Arizona Coyotes on January 3rd of 2023. So I got to witness Matthew Tkachuk's first hat trick, and now getting to see a second, and then him eclipsing 100 points on the night. In segment number 2, we are going to discuss more about the win for the Florida Panthers as they defeat the Montreal Canadiens by a final score of 5-2. Put a bow on this season series as the Cats sweep the Habs. And we're going to discuss more about the comments that were made by Matthew Tkachuk's father, Keith Tkachuk. We're going to discuss that next year on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about FanDuel Sportsbook. And tournament season is heating up. There's no better place to get in the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to reclaim your no-sweat first bet. Then you can wager from everything from the money line, point spreads, which team will be cutting down the net. It's all safe and secure and super easy to use. So don't miss out on your chance for a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Segment number 2 here on this Friday, March 31st. Edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Got Nick Fairbanks here on the show to recap this 5-2 victory for the Florida Panthers over the Montreal Canadiens. And Nick, the Cats were also doing really well on eliminating the finishing opportunities of the Montreal Canadiens. They had their rushes. There was a point where the Montreal Canadiens had more rush chances than the Florida Panthers, but still the Panthers were just consistently getting back, consistently on the back check. I mean, and they were committed. They were committed to just getting into the shooting and passing lanes. I mean, there's a 3-second window where Anthony Duclair had 2 consecutive blocks in like 3 seconds there as well. And also with the Panthers, I mean, just the Jeff Chikrin broke it down in the intermission about how the Florida Panthers, when it came to puck battles, there was never one guy alone. Neither. You always saw 2 white sweaters around, and that and the community that has a lot to do with instinct, not only communication, but just natural instincts when you're on the ice of saying, okay, I know that if this guy is alone here, I need to go back here for some support to get, especially if you're in your offensive zone, for an opportunity to get it back out to the point. And the Panthers were doing such a great job of getting it back to the point and then immediately going to the near the blue paint to create some traffic in front of Sam Montembeault. So it was a great breakdown that I appreciated from Jeff Chikrin in the intermission.
Yeah, and that's the essence of forechecking and everything. So one guy usually going to go in deep and cause, disruption and hopefully catch the defender and, hold him up against the boards and, hold the puck up against the boards. Then your support comes in and they're supposed to be the ones that are supposed to retrieve the puck, get it up to the point, or at least find somebody open, hopefully in the slot as well as everybody's coming in the offensive zone. But you didn't see a lot of that last night. Against Toronto, and rightfully so. Toronto is a much faster, much more experienced team, whereas Montreal is younger, and I think they're still trying to find their way, obviously. But you got to see the difference in experience and the difference in, wanting the game. I'm not saying Florida didn't want it last night, but, we'll get into it in a couple of minutes. But you could just tell there was a little bit of a difference tonight rather than last night. So it seemed like everybody was willing to do their part. As you said, Anthony Duclair blocked 2 shots within a matter of seconds. I've never seen him do that before. But it's things like that will make this team successful. And if they see Duke doing that, then who knows who else is going to do that. Maybe Barkov will get down on one knee and block one. I hope not, because with his injury history lately, I don't want anything to go wrong with him. But they did the little things right tonight, and that's really why they won.
Yeah, and you spoke about getting it down low, and that happened on the power play goal that Rhino had to Tkachuk as well, where you see Rhino puck handling a little bit, and then you see him draw Edmondson towards him, and then he was able to get the easy feed to Tkachuk right on the doorstep as well, and that's just the difference whenever you're committed to getting the puck down low as well. And I mean, finishing off with Lundell stripping Nick Suzuki as he was exiting the zone, and then backhand, forehand, back to forehand to beat Montembeault, and then Tkachuk capping it off with the empty netter. Even though the Montreal Canadiens did score 6-on-4, but never a threat for the Florida Panthers to lose this one. It was, for the most part, from start to finish, just the Panthers' game all throughout Thursday night, but. It comes a few days after Keith Tkachuk goes on radio on TSN 1050. I believe I screenshotted the quote here, Nick. And here's some of the things that he said. He said, "Quote, this was before their game against the Maple Leafs, mind you. Quote, this is do or die for the Panthers right now. They're a soft team and they're getting everything they deserve right now. They should be a lot better than they are showing right now." And more stuff from Keith Tkachuk. Instead of trying to get autographs with Matthews and Marner, they should probably check a little harder. I know I sound like a frustrated person, but I know every time I go to watch Ottawa, they might not be the most talented team, but they're going to play hard. Maybe Florida should take a page out of their book, close quote. And since that, Nick, the Florida Panthers have won both of their remaining games in Canada and wrapped the Canadian part of the road trip. But you just see the difference in finishing the checks as well, and as soon as they finish it, they're getting right back into their position, especially around Alex Lyon and protecting the house.
Mm-hmm. So I retweeted Keith Tkachuk's comments yesterday, and I said that he was 100% correct and that he didn't say anything wrong here. After kind of reflecting, kind of what he said. I mean, it needed to be said, but why did it have to come from him? I would like to hear if there was any other talks during the season, if Paul Maurice pulled the team aside, or anybody in the coaching staff, or maybe Bill Zito came down and said something. I know Dale Talon was actually good for that. He would actually come down off the press box and talk to the team if need be. But it was definitely needed. People needed to be called out finally. And you saw Paul Maurice finally lose it last night.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of been wondering where that's been. And maybe the team finally got it. But, I don't think this team or the players really understand that there's a lot of hope in them and that there's a lot of expectations from them, even though, yes, we are in South Florida and unfortunately not well looked upon in many other cities, but it's serious down here. Expectations have been, hired, and nothing less than making the playoffs and getting a good run to the Cup is unacceptable. And that's why I agree with his comments. They have to come and bring it every single night.
Yeah, and you also think about how when they did step on the ice, yeah, they didn't look their best even in their win against Toronto on Wednesday. But you think about how the Panthers, even on Thursday night, think about they went to the box twice. Yeah, they gave up a power play goal. The second one was the one that they gave up was a few minutes left in the game, and it really didn't make a difference in the game. But the other one was maybe a head scratching one of Brandon Montour right near Alex Lyons' crease on a cross check on Harvey Pinard, which I kind of like I kind of like Harvey Pinard on that top line with Nick Suzuki. He's a good story. I believe he's a 7th round pick if I'm not mistaken. But just with and it's not at least for Thursday. There wasn't the stupid penalties that we saw. We saw the stupid penalties on Tuesday, but we didn't see them against Montreal. But thing is that gonna continue? I don't know. We've had 76 games of this throughout the season, and is one person shouting on the radio? I know it's a big name in Keith Tkachuk, but is that all of a sudden gonna make the Panthers discipline? I'm not quite sure, but a good night for the Panthers tonight as far as that category.
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest with you, I think I would have the games flipped. I would definitely have maybe only 2 or 3 penalties against the Maple Leafs rather than give them 4, 5, 6 that they gave them last night. Even though the penalty kill was really good last night, you still don't want to give a team like that chances to get back in the game.
There you go.
You know, as you were saying earlier, yeah, you were kind of concerned about this game because this one could have been a trap game as well. I mean, Florida's basically bulldozed this team the whole season. And, you know, after that first shot that Lyon let in, kind of like turn your head a little bit like, what's going on? Like, what was that? And if Florida started taking penalties after that, this was going to be a long game. And I don't know if they would ever been able to actually play the structured game that they wanted to or play the full 60 minutes that they did tonight.
Yeah, your mindset is very different when you're playing from behind, and the way you finish things when it comes to playing ahead, and you're a little more lapsed, and of course that happened towards the end. I mean, but the Florida Panthers, I mean, they went the first 15 minutes of the third period only giving up 2 shots on goal for the Montreal Canadiens. So even then, they were great in just finishing the game and just keeping it a well distance and just allowing the clock to run out and just get this one over with. And man, power play against the Habs. One more thing before we transition, but 9 of 20, 45% on the power play against the Habs. 27 goals against Montreal, and it's just we're not going to see this every day against a single opponent, but you know, it's one thing we're going to look at definitely when we look back at a season series like this years from now. The other one was last year against Columbus, last year in their President's Trophy winning season, but crazy with this Panthers team and how much they can score. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to talk about the Panthers possibly salvaging this road trip after a not so great start, and we're going to discuss Panthers, Blue Jackets, and we're going to discuss more of the playoff picture next on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Third and final segment here on this Friday, March 31st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, where the Florida Panthers are coming off a 5-2 victory against the Montreal Canadiens. And Nick, I said that this trip was a must, 7 points, but you could possibly get away with 6, depending on results from other games. But the Pittsburgh Penguins do win at home. They shut out the Nashville Predators, which the Nashville Predators had something to play for, being close to a wild card race. But of course, with Nashville being a team that sold at the deadline, a lot of injuries as well for their team on the players who are there. Didn't really think that they were going to go into Pittsburgh and pick up a win on Thursday night, but there's still a huge major opportunity. The Pittsburgh Penguins do have a game in hand, but before the Florida Panthers even take the ice on Saturday night against the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Pittsburgh Penguins will be making up a game in hand. But yeah, only for a few hours.
They'll make it up on Sunday.
But they also have a back-to-back on against Philly. I believe that's on the road. I'd have to double check that. But Penguins Bruins, 3:00. A few hours later, Panthers, Blue Jackets. And the last trip in Columbus was not a pretty one for the Panthers. 50 shots on goal against Danil Tarasov. I believe he was talking during that time how he looked up to Bobrovsky growing up. And then the Blue Jackets were super opportunistic on their few opportunities. And then when the Florida Panthers face off against the Columbus Blue Jackets, the second go around in South Florida, they have half as many shots. The Panthers, I'm talking about, but then they shut out the Blue Jackets, and they were opportunistic on those opportunities. So the crazy how the Panthers were able to get more goals on less shots and more up front. I mean, they were throwing muffins in that first matchup against Tarasov, but this looks like possibly another trap game for the Panthers. I know the Columbus Blue Jackets are in the Bedard sweepstakes right now, battling with San Jose and Chicago, but also a big opportunity to just salvage the road trip.
Yeah, and when you play teams like this, you can't expect them to just lay down. I mean, you have guys playing on that team who probably shouldn't even be up here right now. I mean, I know Columbus is not only, in the sweepstakes for Bedard, but they have an amazing amount of injuries, going on right now. So you have a couple guys that are, maybe third, fourth string defensemen. I mean, I think at one point the game that we ended up winning, they only had maybe one or two NHL defensemen playing. And kind of like how Montreal is right now. I feel like they only have maybe two NHL legit defensemen on the back at 6. So you got to take advantage of that. You got to put pucks on net, and you have to beat every Blue Jackets player to every single puck, have the support, and just play your game. Blue Jackets have really nothing to play for, but again, these guys who are playing for jobs next year, or at least trying to stay where they're at, with the AHL club that they may be with. So don't expect them just to lay down at all. So hopefully Florida can come out victorious, but, as we've seen this season with Philly, Arizona, the Blue Jackets, Chicago, who else am I missing right now? Just like those 4 teams. Let's just take care of business on Saturday.
Yeah, and the Blue Jackets took the Boston Bruins tonight on the road to overtime, but they did lose. But I know the Boston Bruins are probably maybe a little relaxed right now as they're trying to prepare for the postseason. They're going to win the President's Trophy. I think they're 1 point away from it, but still, it's not a team that you could just walk all over.
Yeah, and the one question I do have for you is, since Boston and Pittsburgh are playing at 3:00 on Saturday, does Boston play down to Pittsburgh, allows them to win because they want to play Pittsburgh in the playoffs? Or do they beat Pittsburgh and give Florida a chance to get the last playoff spot because they'd rather play Florida?
I mean, if you're the Boston Bruins, you have to ask yourself, who scares you more? When it comes to who you're facing. And yeah, both teams have questionable goaltending with the Panthers and the Penguins. But as far as like that killer instinct, yeah, there's Tkachuk, yeah, there's Crosby, but you rather not face Crosby, right?
So 100%.
If you're the Boston Bruins, I think you try to avoid playing the Penguins and you rather play the Panthers. And I mean, look at the Tampa Bay Lightning, and like this third to last game last year, they beat up on the Panthers in their last regular season game. And don't you think that was a confidence booster, even though they had a whole round before they faced in the second round? That's kind of the way I think about it. And I don't think the Bruins in that one are gonna take their foot off the gas pedal. And of course, this is a matinee game, nationally televised game as well, and not only it's a chance to clinch the President's Trophy for them. And they're already thinking this could be a preview of a first round matchup. We don't want to show any sign of weakness, neither. That there are parts that are vulnerable for them as well. So I think that the Boston Bruins, I don't think they're going to lay back in this one on Saturday afternoon.
I hope not. I want Florida to hold a playoff spot longer than a day. It would be nice.
Yes, please.
And then, if Pittsburgh ends up losing that game on Saturday and then goes into Philadelphia on Sunday, who Philadelphia's been playing a lot better. And I don't know if you heard this, but John Tortorella wasn't on the bench tonight. He was actually up in the press box. So there might be a change coming in Philadelphia. So you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, you don't know. Well, I think this was planned from the start, to be honest with you. I don't know if Torts wants to necessarily coach anymore. I think he wants to be on the ops side of things, kind of like Barry Trotz. Now he's going to be the GM of Nashville and everything. But no easy games for Pittsburgh actually coming up. Not even for the Islanders either. I think if we're talking about the wild card spots, I think the Islanders have 2 against Carolina coming up, and who else are they playing? I think it's the Rangers.
Which team are you talking? Which team did you say?
The Hurricanes. I'm sorry, the Islanders. I'm sorry.
The Islanders have a back-to-back in Tampa and Carolina. Home against Tampa, home against Philly, at Washington, and then home against Montreal on a Wednesday. Game 82 for the Islanders will be on a Wednesday.
Okay. So they have some games that are winnable and everything, but the other thing too about it is that they have to go through that 3 or 4 game gauntlet to get points. And if they don't get any, they're going to be in bad shape, because I think that Pittsburgh and Florida do have a good shot, because Florida has the best schedule going forward. And they need to take care of business. So that's the silver lining right now. Florida's going to lose 4. They might win 4 or 5 now and get us back on the wagon and everything. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how everything shakes out.
We'll see. And a few also, I've talked about this stat going back to the matchup against the Columbus Blue Jackets, about this one stat called man games lost, which is games lost due to injury, and the Columbus Blue Jackets are up there in the National Hockey League. I mean, Patrick Laine didn't play tonight for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Zach Werenski's on LTIR. Eric Brandson's day to day. Former Panther Eric Branson. Elvis Merzlikins is out. According to Daily Faceoff, it says COVID-19. Jake Bean's on IR. I mean, it's a big opportunity for the Panthers. I know we're talking about other teams and playing games, but man, if there's a way to wrap up this show, the way I want to say is just beat Columbus. Focus on Saturday night, but thankfully we'll get a little bit more of an indication of where the Panthers stand because of Pittsburgh playing at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Just beat Columbus. Beat Columbus.
One game at a time. That's all you can do in the NHL. You can't get caught up in just puzzles or sets of games, because if you start doing that, looking too far ahead, then you lose grasp of what's in front of you and what you need to accomplish and to get you to where you want to go. So big game on Saturday.
Big game, no doubt, for sure. So Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Next time you come on the show, the Florida Panthers will be playing their 3rd and final matchup against the Ottawa Senators, and we'll maybe some points and goals for Matthew Tkachuk against Brady Tkachuk, and maybe FLA Live Arena will be chanting Matthew's better next Thursday, and hopefully we'll be talking about it. But in the meantime, tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Armando, thanks for having me on again this week and everything. Glad that the Panthers got a win. But if you guys would like to follow me, I'm on Twitter at Prudentia0, and look forward to conversing with everybody about the rest of the season.
Absolutely, Nick, and thank you so much, and I'll see you next Friday.
Thank you.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Now make your second listen, Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. So I'm Armando Velez with Nick Fairbanks, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.